In front of a grand mansion, a man collapsed to the ground, the clear victim of a sudden, violent attack. His partner, who had been standing right beside him, stared in shock and questioned who could have done such a thing. Atop the towering structure, 3 figures observed the scene below. One was a man with dark hair and glasses, dressed in a sharp suit. Another was a young man with brown hair, clad in simple, ragged clothes. The third was a boy with striking white hair and piercing red eyes. They were the Ark's theft, and this is the story of the rise of a boy who had been labeled as utterly out of place. A child's voice began to narrate. One night, when I was 6 years old, I witnessed a man's entire life. The day of his birth, his time at school, his first love, and finally, the day of his death. The white-haired boy, Ark, woke with a start, wondering what had just happened. It had felt like a dream, yet the details were as vivid as actual memories. Airplanes, computers, the laws of physics, everything he had learned in college, he remembered it all with perfect clarity, as if it were knowledge from another world entirely. The boy began to cry, then looked down at his own small hand, wondering if the tears were for the man's fiancée who had died, or for the deep sense of longing he now felt for that other world. He clenched his pillow in frustration until a sharp knock on his door broke the silence. It was a butler, who called him Ark and informed him that his breakfast was ready. The meal was carelessly thrown onto his bed, spilling coffee and leaving everything in a messy state. 2 women, maids in the household, mocked the boy as they left, telling him to enjoy his meal and calling him the former successor. Ark simply thanked them for the food, and the mockers slammed the door in his face. The country where he lived was built with magic. He was part of a noble house of powerful sorcerers, the Wraithefts. The family's founder had made enormous military contributions to the country, securing a high and respected status for their lineage. It was therefore essential that the family's successor possess great magical power. Naturally, there had been high expectations for Ark, the eldest son, until the day of his magical power measurement a week ago. When he took the test, it was revealed that his power was no greater than that of a commoner, making him completely incapable of becoming the family's leader. Upon receiving this devastating news, the boy had looked at his parents and begged for a second chance. The response he received was a sharp, stinging slap from his father across his face, something that had been unthinkable to him until that moment. The fraternal bond with his father was shattered, and Ark was officially disinherited, treated as useless by his own family, as nothing more than trash. The boy found himself utterly alone and abandoned. He was considered unfit as a successor, rejected by the very people to whom he had been most devoted. After that, there wasn't much left for him to do but to study. However, it seemed that no matter how much he read, he couldn't find a way to increase his magical power. He had thought that through knowledge, he might find some hidden path or technique. Even with the advanced knowledge of a 20-year-old man from another world, he still found nothing. His studies were interrupted by his younger sister, Ligia. She asked if he was studying again. He greeted her, as she invited him to come and play. Ark didn't mind, but he wondered if it was really okay for her to be playing with him, as she had been explicitly told not to approach her brother. The girl confirmed that it was their mother who had told her that, but she still wanted to play with him. Moved by her unwavering attachment, Ark agreed to play, and as she hugged him, Ligia told him she loved him. The young girl was the only one in the entire household who still treated him the same way as before. She was his only salvation. However, their brief moment of peace was shattered by a furious scream. Their father had discovered that the girl had defied his orders. He grabbed his daughter by the arm, pulling her away from the boy. Afraid that something might happen to his sister, Ark immediately took the blame for her being there. His father retaliated with another slap to his face, knocking him to the ground. He informed him that he was tired of warning him. He must not approach Ligia, because she was now next in line for the family succession, and he should know his place. Kneeling on the ground, the boy apologized, but then his head was stepped on and pressed hard against the floor. Ignoring his son's pained gasps, the man continued his speech, asking what would happen if the boy's incompetence were to pass on to his daughter. Ark was grabbed by his clothes and lifted into the air while being called trash. His father continued to strike his face repeatedly. Finally, he warned him that he did not want him to approach the next heir, Ligia, again. He informed him that if it happened again, he would become a target for magic practice. The boy stated that he understood and once again apologized. Extremely downcast, Ark got up, looking for something cold to put on his bruised face. As he headed to his room, the other people in the mansion called him useless and pointed at his beaten face. They believed it would be better to expel him from the place entirely. Finally, he reached his room and locked himself inside. At that moment, the accumulated physical and emotional pain finally hit him. Ark fell to the ground and looked at his trembling, wounded hands, while repeating to himself that none of this was a big deal, because he had the experience of a 20-year-old man who had been far more miserable than he was now. The boy recalled the memories he had had in his dream, of the mockery he had suffered from his classmates who had forced him to carry their bags. With tears in his eyes, he convinced himself that if that person was able to endure everything, then he could too. In his mind, memories of the parents from that other world came to him, worried about his education at school. At that moment, his tears stopped, and he continued remembering the couple saying they would always be by his side. The tears began to flow again as he remembered his current parents and how they, too, used to treat him well and tell him they loved him. Ark could no longer hold back his sadness and the feeling of a world in freefall. His despair was now evident, his suffering glaring. There was no way to hide it. In tears, he questioned why he did not have an innate ability for magic. His entire situation was due to the amount of power he possessed, and he could do nothing about it. In his desperation, he believed it would have been better if he had never been born. Then, he remembered when the boy in the other world had grown tired of the bullying he had suffered and how he had faced those who tormented him. He had stood up and fought, knowing he would not win. This made him wonder why he continued to stay in this miserable place. Overcoming the tightness in his chest, he expressed his determination not to lose. He stated that he would become a sorcerer one day and make his parents look at him again. Determined to prove his parents wrong, Ark dedicated himself even more to his studies. The boy stayed up all night, studying the use and concept of what magic is, how it modulates and manipulates matter, barely noticing that dawn had already arrived. It was assumed that the magic of this world had fewer limitations than the system of the other world. Here, there was an ancient language written with symbols called astrologos, based on astrological and zodiacal symbols. Like a syntax game, the symbols were the vocabulary used to compose sentences, which were responsible for structuring magic. The more complex the sentence, the more energy was required, and the more control was demanded. Without using the necessary amount of energy for each element of the sentence, the magic would not be activated, as it required a calibrated distribution. Simply put, a vast vocabulary and a large amount of energy were needed to increase one's power. Even though the knowledge from the man in his dream helped him, it was useless if his magical power did not increase. No matter how much he read, and with no one willing to teach him, he felt stuck. But his breakdown was interrupted by a scream. Opening the window, he wondered what was happening. There, he saw a man standing outside the house. The tall, young, blond man greeted him and asked how he was doing. It was his uncle Craig. Inside the house, everyone was having tea. The newest visitor noticed that Ark and his sister had grown taller since the last time, and the boy was happy to see him. Craig remarked that his nephew was already speaking like a grown man, and Lisa added that her brother studied a lot. This was his paternal uncle, meaning his father's brother, Joshua. Like Ark, he had been disinherited due to a lack of ether, or magical energy, and had therefore fled the state. However, he had excelled in martial arts, earning a good military position. It was said that his physical strength surpassed that of his brother. The boy was certain that if he asked his uncle for help, he might find some guidance. But before he could do so, his parents opened the door with a harsh demeanor. The two brothers looked at each other and exchanged greetings, Joshua coldly and Craig informally. The tension between them was broken by the family leader when he noticed his son in the room. He questioned what Arcus was doing there, as he considered him unfit to share the same space as the rest of the family. He then raised his hand to hit him once again, yelling at the boy and asking how many times he would need to warn him. But this time, it was different, because his uncle stopped his brother from doing so. Craig asked what Joshua thought he was doing by raising his hand against his own son. Annoyed by the question, the family leader explained that Arcus did not have enough ether to belong to the family, and that Lisa was the current heir. At that moment, the girl became uneasy, drawing her brother's attention and allowing their uncle to understand the situation. He then questioned whether it was too soon to make this decision, as the boy was only 6 years old, and therefore still had the potential to grow. But Joshua stated that his brother knew very well that this family did not accept people without talent. However, in a carefree manner, Craig responded to his brother, asking if he remembered what their father had told them before he had died. The current leader considered this irrelevant, stating that the boy was incapable of leading the family now. The boy was no longer a son nor an heir, just a useless waste. Even a stray dog would be better. His hateful speech was interrupted by Craig, who released a menacing aura while questioning his brother's ability to insult his own son in such a manner. An unfortunate man even soiled himself at the sight of this, while his brother approached him threateningly, making even his wife scream in fear. But before he could lay a hand on them, Ark asked his uncle for a favor, wishing to be trained in magic by him. Joshua immediately tried to curse his son, but he was interrupted by his brother, who asked for confirmation from his nephew. Confirming once again, the boy stated that he wanted to be trained by him because he no longer intended to feel fear or remain stagnant. Now, he would do something about it. His determination earned his uncle's admiration. His father, however, did not like the idea and asked if he wished to ridicule the Wraitheft name. But that was not his intention. He was doing it precisely for the family. As the annoying person he was, Joshua continued questioning, but the boy kept speaking. If he proved that he had talent, there would be no reason for him to be disinherited from the family, and he questioned his father if his statement was incorrect. Joshua even tried to respond, but in this conversation, he had no power. Then, Craig placed a hand on his shoulder and laughed, saying that his son had won this one. He then said that it was still too early to decide that the boy was the shame of the family, and stated that he understood the situation. Apparently, his brother thought that Ark's decision to become someone in life was a way to defy him, just as it had been a defiance to their father. Joshua's silence only confirmed everything. Craig decided to accept. He would teach Arcus and make him an excellent mage. Ruffling his nephew's hair, he not only gave him confidence but also hope. The boy thanked his uncle, as he had now found his first mentor, heading toward his new journey. Craig celebrated the opening of his first class of students, while Ark stated that he would do his best. The boy intended to prove that he would become an excellent mage and change his parents' judgment, making his uncle proud. Already feeling like a teacher, Craig said that since his nephew already had the fundamentals, it would be a good idea to give a demonstration. He then pointed at a target. Next, he recited while concentrating energy. Transform the fury within me into flames, burn my enemies with your wailing, and incinerate everything in your path. Releasing a blaze of fire in the shape of an arrow, he finished the spell by saying, and become the flaming arrow. The magic struck the target, completely burning it. Craig asked Arcus to watch carefully to understand what magic was. That was the first time he had seen combat magic up close. It was something incredible in the eyes of a child. His uncle said that with a few pointers, he would soon be able to take care of himself on the battlefield. But for now, they must return to the basics, which somewhat startled the boy. First, you must learn to control, Craig said, pointing to Ark's stomach. His uncle intended to redo the magical power test, and for that, he asked his nephew to concentrate his energy in that area. Focusing, the boy closed his eyes and began to accumulate energy at that point. Energy started to flow from his body to his stomach. It was warm and felt like a liquid or vapor moving. That was enough for Craig. With that, Ark was already capable of performing simple tasks. But if he managed to improve, he would be able to perform some tricks, like the one his uncle was about to demonstrate. The teacher concentrated energy in his eye and looked toward the mansion, seeing energy emanating from one of the rooms. He then asked if Lisa's room was in the west wing of the third floor, something Ark confirmed. At that moment, he realized his uncle could sense ether flowing. Craig explained that humans and dark spirits, all of them, have ether, and it was he who had studied and discovered how to detect it. Ark beamed with admiration and asked if his uncle could sense the amount each person has, something answered with a laugh but understood as confirmation. The boy found this incredible. Craig boasted that Joshua did not have this ability. This information increased Ark's desire to learn the skill, as his determination burned within him. The boy, driven by a noticeable resentment toward his father, asked his uncle, "How does one know how much ether to put into a spell?" So far, nothing that had been said had directly answered this question. Craig then asked if his nephew truly desired this answer, which the child confirmed with the utmost shamelessness. He responded that it's all about intuition. This left the poor boy in shock at such a shallow answer. But the teacher explained that magic cannot be seen because it is immaterial, so there is no way to measure it. It's a matter of practice. One must feel it in their gut. The conclusion is that magic is complicated. But then the boy's uncle asked if he was already giving up, as they were just getting started. He then threw several books on top of him, and Ark questioned the reason for this, only to be answered with another question: what had he done to learn the ancient language and the Atrologos? The boy responded that he had read dictionaries, and his uncle explained that this was very good for an amateur. What he had given the boy were the ancestral chronicles. The ancient language is recorded in 6 titles: the birth of heaven and earth, documentation of the stars, the spiritual era, the chosen mages, the prophecy of shadows and demons, and the collapse of society. He also explained what each one was about, making his nephew swallow dryly at the overwhelming amount of information. But even he didn't know if it was all true, as in the end, they had never been able to decipher all the chronicles, especially the prophecy of shadows. Even he had no idea what the author was talking about. But if Ark wished to become a master of magic, he must devour these books, understand every word and its context to extract as much as possible from them. The boy confirmed that he understood what his master was saying. Then he got a smack on the head with a book, with his master stating that there were even more books beyond these. These were not just any stories, and this made Arcus wonder what would happen if he deciphered them all. His uncle answered, "Your name will go down in history. But before running, he must first learn to walk." Yet these words alone were enough to make a sparkle appear in the boy's eyes. This reaction gave his uncle a good feeling. He would not let all this effort go to waste. Craig intended to turn his nephew into a beast in magic. Now, under his uncle's tutelage and with the memories of that other man, his future had hope, and maybe even his ether would increase. But he ended up biting his tongue in the end. Even after a month, he had found nothing about how to increase his ether, and the knowledge of the other man did not help. At the moment, he was testing the concept of compressing ether, and had been doing so for hours until he began to wonder if he was actually consuming ether. Suddenly, his energy spiraled out of control and took the form of flames. The energy was burning. Arcus had gone too far with his training and wondered what he should do now, if he should release the energy. But he couldn't imagine that working. But something crossed his mind, to just let laziness take over and leave it for later. Maybe at some point, it would stop burning. Then he realized that it had already gotten dark. He had lost track of time. Maybe it was time to find something to eat, the boy thought as he left the library, only to run into his father. Joshua looked at the boy and saw him with a book, rhetorically questioning whether he was studying magic. He said that no matter what he learned from his brother, his ether would still be scarce. The boy retorted, saying, "With all due respect, my noble father, ether is neither the beginning nor the end of becoming a great mage." His petulance was corrected with a slap so hard it could have made his head spin 360 degrees. The boy was thrown against the wall by the force of the blow while his father spoke, hatred in his eyes, that the boy was nothing more than a nuisance. As he lay on the ground alone, he heard footsteps approaching. It was Lisa, worried about his well-being. She kept repeating that the boy was bleeding as she cried over his state. Arcus insisted that it didn't bother him, but his sister cried, saying that it was all her fault. She continued, "They are hitting you, being cruel, all because I will be the heir in your place. Forgive me, please. It's all my fault." The boy hugged her, reassuring her that none of this was her fault. Lygia hugged him and asked why everyone couldn't just get along so they could play together again. But Ark had no answer for her. His gaze reflected his anger and indignation at the situation that was making his sister cry. Here, one's value came from their abilities. What Lisa wished for wasn't much, but she would never be able to have it until he proved to their parents that they were wrong. But eventually he would fix this. 2 years had passed, and Craig asked the boy to show him what he could do. He then recited, "Transform the fury within me into flames, burn the skies with your roar, and incinerate everything in your path, becoming a flaming arrow." "Flamarun!" the boy shouted, launching a great arrow of fire into the sky. His uncle congratulated him, telling him how amazing that was, and Arcus, looking at him confidently, thanked him. A merchant praised the quality of an engraving. It was crafted by Arcus, an admirer, for the exceptional quality of the engravings he made, as they allowed the production of brilliantly shining glass of the highest quality. Besides paying for the materials, the merchant provided him with magic silver, something essential for the production of engravings. Smiling, the boy said he would soon return with his next order. The merchant thanked him while the boy walked away, celebrating his sale. As he continued producing these materials, his repertoire of engravings expanded. Shining glass is a type of lamp made using magical engravings, but that is only one of its uses. His uncle had suggested their production as a way to refine his magical abilities while also providing him with a good sum of money. With the earnings, he would be able to buy new books. As he was thinking about this, someone bumped into him. The two collided and fell toward the ground. The one who had bumped into him was a girl, who had managed to stay on her feet at the last second. The girl had long hair, tied with a ribbon that stood out more on her left side. To stay upright, she had used magic. She apologized for the incident. Then she helped Arcus up, but before she could introduce herself, she was interrupted by two men chasing her. Realizing the situation, our protagonist grabbed her arm and pulled her to a safe spot, hidden behind a crate. They heard the pursuers complaining about not being able to find a simple girl. The sun was about to set, so they decided to search elsewhere. Arcus told her they were gone. The girl, relieved, said the situation had made her heart race. Our protagonist asked why those men were after her. She said she didn't know, they had just suddenly started chasing her, and when she had noticed, she had run. After explaining the situation, she looked at the boy, thanked him for his help, and introduced herself as Sue. Arcus accepted her gratitude and introduced himself, shaking her hand. Then the girl said she had never seen him around before and asked which family he belonged to, making the boy slightly uncomfortable. So he changed the subject, suggesting they take the opportunity to head to the main street. But he was silenced by the girl, who told him to be quiet. The poor boy was confused until he heard a certain noise. He wondered if they were coming back. While Sue whispered for them to take an alley, the two walked through a very narrow alley, making the boy wonder where they were, until they reached a dead end. A terrible situation. Arcus told her to hurry and take another path, but someone said they wouldn't allow it. A man approached, saying he had finally found the girl, though it had taken him quite some time, so he wouldn't let her escape again. Sue asked how he knew she would be there. The man replied that he had searched everywhere but did not explain how he had found her so quickly. Arcus suspected he had enhanced physical abilities. This meant he was a sorcerer. He then asked if the man was a kidnapper and why he was doing this to a child. The pursuer stated that there was only one reason: money, especially when it came to such a cute and intelligent girl. The criminal said that looking at Arcus, he didn't seem insignificant and asked if he was also after the girl. But the boy found that despicable. The man understood that he would have to play a little with the boy. Meanwhile, our protagonist considered his disadvantage against an adult sorcerer. Fortunately, he didn't seem to take them seriously since they were children, and that might give them a chance. As he thought, the aggressor decided which magic he would use. After deciding, he snapped his fingers and recited his spell. With my power, become the rope that punishes them. However, his spell was interrupted by someone casting their own. It was Sue who spoke. May my scorching tongue burn the darkness. Lamentation becomes disaster when favored by the wind. Arcus was surprised, as she was using an original spell, and he listened as she concluded the chant and continued, striking the sky. Then she launched a tornado toward the aggressor. The attack was about to hit him head-on, but he raised an apparently weak barrier. However, it was enough to block Sue's attack, leaving him unharmed. Nonetheless, the criminal admitted that he was indeed surprised that a child her age had managed to create her own spell. While the girl was in shock over the ineffectiveness of her attack, he explained that it only lacked more destructive power due to the grammatical structure of the spell's expression. Ark then explained that in the magic Sue had used, burn the darkness refers to the night. Using it during the day weakens its power. The opponent considered him quite knowledgeable for his age and asked if he came from a good family. Silver hair is quite rare, surely he could be sold for a good price. Now that he knew the girl's capabilities, the attacker had no intention of holding back. If they happened to get hurt, he could just heal them afterward. Sue stuck out her tongue, criticizing the man for fighting seriously against children. But the guy simply questioned her shamelessness for saying that after she had cast an advanced spell. Even so, Arcus noticed that his tone still carried a hint of arrogance, and thought of a way to create an opening. Sue then said that since her tactic didn't work, she'll have to resort to something else, and told Ark to cover his ears while she emanated a strong energy. The amount of magical power she emitted startled the criminal, while the girl recited a new spell. The feet that spin the carousel and the skies restrain and coldly govern the fight of criminals. Before the attack could be completed, Arcus shouted, reciting his own spell. Greed does not distinguish the quality of the object. Take this treasure and receive it in your right arm, assembled without criteria. At that moment, various objects around him were drawn to Arcus's arm, forming a gauntlet of junk. Sue was impressed, as was the criminal, who found this magic strange. Scrap arm! The protagonist shouted, pointing it at the thug. but the man considered it foolish to try hitting him from that distance. The boy warned that this would be true if his arm were to stay there. Then he launched the arm toward the enemy like a rocket. The strike traveled straight at him and hit him head-on, driving him through the alley with immense force and slamming him against the wall. Sue watched all of this in amazement. After completing his attack, only rubble remained over the criminal's body. Sue's eyes sparkled with joy, and she shouted in celebration of their victory. But Arcus tried to stop her, warning that she was being too loud. The girl took offense and asked what he meant by that. Then he explained that when you defeat someone, saying things like, "We did it!" is an invitation for the enemy to come back. While the girl questioned what kind of superstition that was, Arcus explained that it's not any particular superstition, while remembering the other world and how that used to happen there, thinking he should be careful about saying such things. At that moment, Sue remembered something she needed to ask. Excited, she approached Arcus and asked what magic he had used. The girl got closer and closer, repeatedly begging him to explain the spell, leaving the protagonist increasingly cornered. Like an enthusiastic child, she asked him to teach her, making the boy completely desperate and making him realize that Sue was a true magic nerd. However, there were more pressing concerns at the moment. He let the fallen kidnapper be. Ark wanted to make sure he was truly defeated, so he approached the opponent, intending to use magic to ensure he was immobilized. But before he could do anything, he was grabbed by him. Holding the boy hostage, the criminal admitted they had really made him spend energy. This was his first job, and it had turned out to be more complicated than expected, so he couldn't let his guard down. Meanwhile, Arcus asked if the bastard was playing dead, but his mouth was covered by the man, who warned the girl that if she tried to attack him, she might hit her friend instead. Now the coward had a human shield, preventing Sue from making any move. The situation was now more complicated than ever, and our protagonist needed to find a way to escape. He wondered if there was anything he could do, until he remembered his training years ago, when his energy had gone out of control and had burned like a flame. It was all or nothing. Arcus repeated what he had done that day, concentrating all his ether in his stomach and compressing it while consuming it. The energy started to spiral out of control until finally, surprising both of them, it exploded, sending them flying in opposite directions. Ark rushed toward his friend while the criminal crashed into the rubble. Sue ran toward him, asking if he was okay, but the boy was more concerned about what had happened to the other guy. The explosion was so strong that it had knocked him out, even surprising the caster himself. However, now he had another problem to deal with. His action had sparked Sue's curiosity, who asked how he had managed to release such a powerful fart. But Arcus explained that it was magical power, not a fart, which was countered by the girl who said that magical power doesn't send people flying that far. But neither does a fart. The girl continued teasing our protagonist, making jokes and irritating the poor boy. Kids will be kids, right? As they argued, some guards arrived. They'd arrest the kidnapper and commented that it must have been a tough fight for the two unharmed and calm children standing before them. One of the guards couldn't even believe that two kids had managed to defeat a criminal of that caliber. But Sue corrected him, stating that it wasn't both of them, it was just Arcus, while hugging his arm. This made the boy completely embarrassed, while she became all cheerful. The two continued strolling together through the city and sat by a fountain, where Sue thanked him again for saving her and once more introduced herself, just like Ark, who this time stated his full name, Arcus Raytheft. Immediately, his friend recognized his surname as belonging to a noble house, something he didn't like much. But the girl kept emphasizing it just to tease him. Then she pinched his cheeks, calling him cute. She kept teasing, asking if he wouldn't be a pompous noble who says things like, "You'll pay with your body for this audacity," something the boy denied. He even asked if by any chance she knew what that actually meant. The girl responded that it meant he would sell her in pieces, making him realize that in her crazy imagination, it would be something like organ trading. The two then laughed at this situation and at their mutual cluelessness. After that, while buying a hamburger, Sue insisted that Ark teach her the magic from before because it was a really strange and different magic. She asked if he was the one who had invented it, something the boy confirmed. But he explained that it's not that impressive, though his friend disagreed, saying that she herself couldn't create an original spell that good. He was even able to point out the flaw in her incantation, which was impressive. That's why she asked him to teach her. But Ark suggested that they simply teach each other. They decided to go with that, making Sue jump with joy. She stood up and thanked him for the fun day, saying she was counting on him to help her. In a room filled with books, Arcus, sitting on a chair, held a knife in his right hand and a piece of wood in the other. As he concentrated, astroglyphs were engraved into the object. The result was satisfactory. The hot, concentrated ether yielded better results. He had finally achieved consistency. Until his concentration was interrupted by Ligia, making him drop the objects. With the concentrated energy going out of control, an explosion occurred right in front of him. It could be heard from a distance. Arcus asked if his sister was hurt, while he himself had his face scorched. However, the girl was unharmed and was more worried about her brother, apologizing for startling him. The poor thing kept apologizing compulsively, while the boy simply reassured her, explaining that it was his fault. The explosion had caused a huge mess, so his sister offered to help him clean up. As she picked up the objects from the floor, she saw the engraving her brother was making. Enchanted by it, she asked if he was carving seals, making him a little flustered. The boy asked if she had ever made one and requested the seal back. With a smile on her face, Ligia responded that she hadn't, as she had only just begun learning magic. While handing him the piece of wood, she said that she believed her brother must have already learned many spells by now. But in reality, he had only learned the basics, since his uncle had only taught him how to use Flammarion, though at least he could now cast it from memory. Still, that alone impressed the girl, who looked at him with shining eyes. Arcus said that soon she would learn as well, feeling embarrassed by the praise. Ligia responded by promising to do her best. Channeling her magic, she said she would clean everything up in no time. But she stopped midway through the channeling when she noticed small spheres scattered on the ground. It was magical silver that had expanded, spilling from the flask, something he didn't know was possible. To test it, Arcus concentrated more hot energy into the ball, making it expand even further. The two found it amusing. As heat was applied, the balls increased and decreased in size, pulsing. Silver shouldn't have this property. Something must have altered it. However, the boy was only using seals without casting any spells. One possibility is that it had reacted to the compressed ether. The best way to test is to replicate it. So he concentrated energy in his stomach. Then he released the compressed energy toward the silver, making the spheres grow in size again. Ark thought about how useful this could be and, most importantly, whether the magical silver was still usable in this state. Thinking about the expansion, he remembered a similar object from the other world in his memories, a thermometer. And once again, he spoke, this time shouting, "It's a thermometer!" The boy quickly started writing a letter to be sent. Ligia got curious and asked why. It turned out her brother was sending a letter to their uncle, asking about materials. This confused her, making her wonder what her brother was planning to do. The boy responded that he will make something she will love. Sometime later, at his uncle's house, the boy knocked forcefully, calling for him. The maid even tried to stop him, informing him that his relative was resting. On the other side, we see the uncle lying in bed, covered in scars, wondering why there was so much noise so early in the morning. The maid apologized, stating that she had tried to stop him, but the boy was fuming with anger. Craig said that if he was going to break down his door, he had better be at war. Then he noticed the dark circles under his nephew's eyes. But the boy had no time for idle talk and asked him to order the maid to leave the room. He agreed and did so. Then he asked why so much formality, while the boy showed him a piece of wood with a flask attached to it. He questioned whether that was the glass flask he had sent the other day and if something had been put inside it. Without explaining anything, the kid began channeling energy toward the object. Then he said that he had been working on this recently, and asked him to see what happened when ether was applied to the instrument. The contents of the flask expanded, rising along the gauge. At first glance, seeing the movement of the object, Craig didn't think much of it until he finally understood what was happening. Standing up, completely unguarded, he asked the boy if this was what he thought it was. Something answered with a yes. That instrument was capable of measuring ether with precision. His uncle asked if the boy had really managed to produce this on his own. The boy confirmed it but stated that it was an accident. Craig asked if he had told anyone else about this, but no. The boy knew what he was dealing with. A smart move. Until now, there was no place or instrument capable of measuring ether with precision, at least not in any place his uncle had been. This was the discovery of the century. Arcus thought about how this could help increase humanity's understanding of magic. However, his uncle asked what he intended to do with it. The boy did not wish to keep this knowledge to himself, but he needed to be careful about revealing it. Craig still warned him, stating that the boy would have an advantage over the entire world if he kept this a secret. But Arcus did not intend to do that. Eventually, someone else would reach the same conclusion. They would gain more by making it a public discovery. His fortune would grow, and he would help his country. His uncle rubbed his hand over his head as a sign of pride and told him that the boy seemed to already understand and have a good vision. He explained that it's better for him to stay home with the thermometer, at least until the announcement. But then, a little hesitantly, he asked about his friends. His uncle was surprised by the fact that the boy had friends, a very fair reaction. In the following days, he asked for his uncle's help with his work. The two dedicated themselves to improving the instrument and perfecting it, as well as finding ways to produce it on a large scale. And so, hours and hours were spent writing formulas and studying applications, day and night, until finally, after so much effort and hard work, there was only one test left. Looking at the instrument, Arcus concentrated his ether and recited his spell. Guide the object according to my will. Psychokinesis. A small tornado appeared in front of the boy. After that, everything was complete. He had successfully finished and tested the usability of the thermometer, finally able to celebrate his achievement. Right after he had showed it to his uncle, their work was complete. The name Arcus Raytheft would go down in history. With this, his studies and magic would finally progress. Now he just needed to learn a powerful spell. This thought reminded him of when he had been kidnapped in the city. Sure, it was an adult, but in his opinion, that was no excuse for struggling so much to win. That world was not peaceful, so he needed to learn how to defend himself. And for that, a signature spell was important, something original. And what is more original than the knowledge of the man from his memory? So he searched his mind for inspiration until he found it. A weapon, says Arcus, mimicking one with his hand. In this world, guns do not exist, and attacks that cannot be seen are rare. It's somewhat lethal, but his opponents didn't go easy on him. So the boy grabbed the gun gesture with his hand and recited, "Black bullet, cut through the air faster than sound and destroy." However, the projectile fired was very slow and barely hit the target. Something was not right. The boy had specified, faster than sound. So why was it so slow? So he set out to study. The term, black bullet, could not be removed. Looking at ancient texts, this was used to describe black stones used to hunt beasts. Cut through the air faster than sound and destroy it. This is where the problem lay. This sentence needed to be rewritten. This reminded him of Sue's spell. Incinerate. That word is the basis for basic fire spells. However, incinerate the darkness. That phrase has various effects depending on how it is used. In Stories from the Mage's Elegy, the vengeful mage turns his words into fire, which shine brightly and incinerate the darkness. May they fill the night and engulf the buildings in intense flames. The first meaning is to burn something to ashes. The second is to resist the darkness of the night. The third suggests a vengeful flame. Desperate, the boy exclaimed that it's the same as in the world of his dream. A phrase with three meanings that must be considered when reciting. There is much to consider when choosing a phrase. What is being recreated is a weapon, so it must kill instantly and be usable at any moment. For this, 6 volumes of books were at his disposal. The Spiritual Era. The stories written here resembled the myths of the other world. Reading this book, Arcus found his answer. Now, at the training ground, he once again recited his spell. Black bullet, keep the yellow horse galloping across the skies, and in the blink of an eye, see death. The boy created a magic circle at the tip of his finger, from which he fired a high-speed, rotating bullet, precisely hitting the target ahead. The energy emanating from his body demonstrated the imposing nature of his new ability. But his stance crumbled the moment he heard his uncle clapping for his spell, startling him. His uncle had come there to bring good news and was accompanied by a tall man with long, black hair. Craig believed it was a good time for this and decided to introduce him to someone. The man accompanying him was Arcus's newest assistant, news that took our young mage by surprise. Apparently, his uncle had seen the need for a butler for the boy. The first thing to notice about him was his admirable, unparalleled, and completely ignorable glamour. Sighing, the new servant muttered to God, as he had never imagined that the seas would take him from his master to care for a child. Craig asked if that was a problem, but the butler responded that nothing bothered him, though his new master seemed very particular. Immediately, Craig mocked his employee's formal way of speaking, saying that since he was clever, he could bother him as much as he liked, he could handle it. Then, stepping forward, the servant introduced himself to Arcus as Noah Vane and said he looked forward to serving him. The boy reciprocated, stating that it was a pleasure to meet him as well. But his new butler's reaction was somewhat ominous. He said there was no need for such formality, as being excessively formal with one's servant could be seen as an invitation for others to mock. Arcus asked if Noah knew about his disinheritance, something his employee confirmed. However, what mattered was what he would do from now on. The two stared at each other intently as the boy pondered Noah's words. Then he remembered the promise he had made to his sister, finally understanding his new employee's message. From now on, he must not act as a disinherited noble. Ark confirmed that it would be a pleasure to work with his new assistant, who reciprocated the sentiment. Since Craig had no class whatsoever, it fell upon Noah to teach noble etiquette to the boy. That morning, for example, he hadn't even given the poor man any details about where they were going or why he would be serving his nephew. It was just the kind of thing he did, not informing others about important matters. He didn't even try to hide it. Seeing how well they got along and understood each other, Arcus asked if it was really okay for him to have Noah. But Noah himself said there was no problem at all. Resting his hand on his chin, he explained that this change seemed interesting to him. He had only started serving his uncle because he had found it amusing to fulfill his requests, and from what Craig had said, the same would apply to the boy. Ark asked if that was enough to convince him, and Noah replied that it was more than enough. Mockingly, his uncle called the boy crazy and amusing. The well-dressed man before him was the best student at the Royal Magic Academy, yet he had ended up choosing this oddball to be his partner. Noah didn't like the term used. His nickname was Prodigy of Winter, named so by his peers for his love of ice magic and his intellect. His specialties were magical rapier fencing, administration, and etiquette. Arcus was impressed by the butler's portfolio, who thanked him for the introduction but believed it was better to demonstrate his skills rather than talk about them. Craig allowed him to showcase his abilities, and he chose one of his favorite spells. This already piqued the boy's curiosity, who watched intently as his servant recited the spell. Fragmented crystal of ice in this withered garden, upon the cold wind that freezes the depths of this radiant hell, and bring forth these soldiers and the wheels of these halted chariots. The ground before him completely froze, with even some ice spikes appearing. The name of this power was Freeze Gale. Arcus became extremely excited and asked if Noah had created it himself, to which he explained that it was developed based on a spell that halts the advance of enemies. Immediately, the boy began taking notes on this adaptation, catching the butler's attention. The boy then explained that he was recording the ether required to use this spell, but Noah did not understand what he meant. Ark showed his invention, a tool capable of identifying the amount of mana needed for each spell, surprising the butler even more. Another day at the Wraithef mansion, Noah and Arcus were practicing fencing. The focused butler advanced toward the boy without giving him a moment's rest, cornering him more and more until an opening appeared. Arcus lunged toward his servant, almost catching him off guard. The sound of swords clashing could be heard, and soon after, one of them flew into the air. It was the boy's sword, leaving him defenseless on the ground. The butler, pointing his sword at him, informed him that they were done for now, while Ark lamented losing yet again. They had been at it for a while, and so far, the boy hadn't managed to land a single hit on the man. Noah explained that this was due to the boy's overly ambitious strategies. He was trying something he was not yet ready for. The ideal approach was to hold back a little and slowly get used to the rhythm of combat. That was true. Arcus had indeed been replicating movements he had seen in his dream of the other world, but his body was not yet capable of following those techniques. Noticing that he was deep in thought, he quickly disguised it to avoid suspicion. But Noah had already noticed his special talent for learning, quickly picking up everything he had taught. What truly impressed him, however, was the thermometer. He had never seen anything like it before and asked how the boy had gotten it. The boy replied that he had made it himself. The butler was stunned, making him repeat the question, which was answered the same way. The boy even mentioned his uncle's help but confirmed that most of the work was his own. Then the boy asked Noah to cast all the spells he knew, as he wanted to measure the mana cost for each attack. Noah was happy to help but asked how the data would be used. The answer was that it would help calibrate the instrument for its final release. The boy wanted to publish the mana cost for some spells as examples without revealing too much about them. This would also aid him in his own training. Seeing his motivations and abilities, Noah looked at his master and, with a wide smile, stated that he was even more fascinating than he had imagined. Craig laughed, boasting that he was right when he had said his nephew was special. But with a cold demeanor, Noah said that he had not been informed of the reason and that he would not forget this negligence. Then he asked if he could borrow the thermometer at some point, to which Arcus responded that there were some in stock, so there was no need to wait. However, he warned him not to tell anyone, and the butler assured him that there was nothing to worry about. As a loyal servant, he would not leak his secrets. Ark believed and trusted his words, a trust that was mutual between them. But the boy did not hear him say this, and Noah made no effort to repeat it. Finally, the boy found the 3 reserve variations of the meters. Noah asked why so many and whether there was more than one type. The child confirmed this. Each one measured different amounts and degrees of ether. Noah acknowledged this while emanating a large amount of mana due to his excitement, laughing in a somewhat eerie manner, slightly scaring the boy. Recording and analyzing the readings of one's own ether usage, what could be more fascinating for a mage? Noah saw that even with a child's body, the one before him was extremely capable. The boy ended up falling onto his rear while the butler reflected on how fascinating he was. But his training needed to be interrupted, as it was time for his next meeting, something that made him nervous just thinking about it. That same day, at the Magic Guild building, Arcus would meet with his uncle and other important figures. A servant informed someone, not yet revealed, that the dark room had been reserved just as requested by the guests. The figure questioned him about Craig's intentions, and the butler explained that handling murky matters in a room that values privacy was nothing new for him, the old master. He then asked if he knew anything about the 2 servants accompanying him, as he himself had never heard of any relevant discovery from either of them. This led him to believe that the disinherited ray theft was up to something. He then entered the room, being announced by his servant as Godwald Sylvester. Upon seeing that imposing figure approaching, Arcus panicked. Beside him, the guild master looked like a giant, intimidating enough to make him stutter while introducing himself. The boy bowed before his host and apologized for his exaggerated reaction, but the guild master himself saw nothing wrong with it. Still, the boy insisted on apologizing, making him a little uncomfortable. In the background, Noah and Craig laughed at the situation and then reassured the boy, informing him that in the end, the man before him wasn't that scary. Coughing to get their attention, Godwald asked what he wanted and why he had brought his daughter to the meeting. But Craig informed him that this wasn't his daughter but rather his nephew, while Arcus hid behind him. He added that it was clear from the clothes that he was a boy. The boy greeted him and introduced himself, but his masculinity was crushed when the guild master said he looked a lot like a girl. The giant then sat at the table and was about to ask about the purpose of the meeting when he was interrupted by a maid appearing from the corner of the wall, calling his name. Godwald shot her a threatening look and asked why she was interrupting, causing the poor girl to shrink in fear. Crying, she begged him not to kill her, but the master said he had no such intention. Then he asked why she was there. The girl got up and, still trying to compose herself, mumbled something. Her boss shouted at her to speak louder. Immediately, the poor girl knelt before him, begging for her life, leaving him completely speechless. This scene made Arcus tremble in fear and ask if he was really going to kill her, bury her in concrete, and throw her into the sea. Godwald ordered the girl to stop, but the situation only worsened, and the girl started calling for her mother while her boss wondered what he should do in this situation. A few minutes passed, and after the girl had calmed down, she informed them that Mr. Balius had asked her to leave some documents, tea, and sweets for the child in the room. Craig found this very generous, while Arcus stated that he didn't like sweets very much. Godwald pointed out that this was not very common for his age. Craig and Noah agreed that the boy was indeed a little odd, completely ignoring the intended recipient of the comment. Finally, putting aside idle chatter, the boy's uncle decided to explain why they were there, placing the thermometer on the table and asking Sylvester to examine it. He asked what it was, and Craig explained that it was a device capable of measuring ether, a thermometer. This shocked Godwald, who asked him to repeat what he had just said. His question was answered only with a smirk, while the guild master believed such a claim was impossible. Something that could measure ether? Craig told him no, it really worked, pointing to the contents of the flask and explaining that it reacted to ether. Godwald asked if it moved. It was then explained to him that the component inside expands in reaction to the ether it is exposed to. The guild master asked if he was the one who had made it, but his colleague clarified that he had only assisted in its manufacture, pointing to the true creator, Arcus Ray Theft. This astonished and made Godwald incredulous, as the boy before him couldn't be more than 10 years old. Craig continued, saying that even he didn't believe it at first, and that his plan was to make it public eventually, while pushing the object closer to his friend. Taking it in his own hands, Godwald released a certain amount of ether and watched as the material expanded, showing immense sensitivity to his mana. His colleague explained that it was indeed very sensitive, but its range was short, limited to about the size of that room. It didn't detect ether from afar, but it was innovative. He added that this would bring great profits to the country. Godwald asked if they were sure they wanted to do this, as they could keep the invention to themselves. But the decision had already been made, leaving Sylvester no choice but to accept. Still, he asked what Arcus wanted in return for announcing his creation. In full businessman mode, the boy answered without hesitation, money and access to Laner's etheric study scriptures, as many as they could provide. His words impressed him. A mage with values, money and knowledge. 2 things any mage loves, and a typical child of a typical mage. That's how Godwald defined Arcus, leaving him flustered. Craig agreed that his nephew was beyond the norm. The one who had once asked him to teach magic was now developing his own spells. This statement surprised Godwald once again. Creating one's own magic is the final test for students of the Royal Mage Academy, yet less than 10% managed to do it. The only child he knew capable of such a feat was the prince. Thanks, Sylvester, as he looked at the boy and his nervousness. The cup in his hand trembled non-stop due to his insecurity. Despite having so much skill in the master's eyes, he looked more like an innocent girl. I still don't get this fixation on turning this boy into a girl. Anyway, continuing, Godwald agreed that he was indeed a promising young man. He then asked if they had already informed His Majesty about the instrument, to which Craig responded with a negative. The reason for this was that he already anticipated the discussions about production methods, third-party contracts, a very tedious conversation. The king probably wouldn't like being the last to know. That guy seemed to have a nail stuck in his throne. His uncle's words made Ark even more tense about the situation. Trembling with fear, the boy asked if it was appropriate to speak about the king in such a way. This reminded Craig that the boy still didn't know that his uncle and His Majesty were friends and used to sneak out to cause trouble around the city. Noah and Godwald were impressed by his shamelessness and boasting about it. With that, the meeting was concluded. All that remained was for Godwald to prepare for the product's announcement. The 3 of them would notify him when they chose the date. This reminded Sylvester to return the thermometer he had given him, but Ark told him he could keep it. Craig said to consider it a token of appreciation for agreeing to meet them. This made Godwald's eyes shine, though he quickly hid his excitement. Before leaving, he caught his friend's attention and, placing his hand on his chest, said, "For His Majesty, the King." A salute was returned by Craig, who repeated the same gesture and phrase. Arcus hears a familiar voice calling his name and turns toward it. Sue runs across the courtyard, waving both arms high with a big smile. Her boots hit the stone fast, and her ribbons bounce behind her as she shouts that it's time for another study session. Arcus sits on the bench, smiling when he sees her, but Sue's cheer fades as soon as she spots the bandage on his cheek. She rushes to him, her smile gone, eyes full of worry. Arcus tries to laugh it off, but Sue looks around the quiet courtyard, realizing what must have happened. She knows the Wraitheft family took away his inheritance. Her mood changes fast, and she starts scolding whoever hurt him, angry that anyone would think that was okay. Arcus rubs his sore cheek and admits he's kind of used to it now. He says his skills still don't match the Wraitheft name, which is why he gets treated this way. Sue frowns and says it's strange that he was disinherited just because his ether is weak. Arcus blushes and thanks her for caring, though he tries to hide how much it means to him. To her, he's no different from any other magician, just someone still growing stronger. Hearing that, Arcus feels a little better, and for the first time that day, his smile feels real. Arcus keeps his voice calm while explaining that his ether levels are about average. He says Noah told him some officials have even less, so being able to use magic at all is already impressive. Sue listens with her legs swinging on the bench and asks why he's still training so hard. Arcus sighs, unsure how to answer. She tilts her head, waiting for him to explain. Sue leans closer and says he doesn't have to do magic anymore since he's not the heir. If it were her, she says she'd hate magic after everything that happened. Arcus thinks for a moment, then suddenly lifts his head with a determined look. He says he wants to become a famous magician so he can prove them wrong. Sue just stares, unimpressed, and asks if he's serious. Arcus freezes, then blurts out that yes, he is. Realizing how dumb that sounded, he laughs awkwardly and scratches his head. He admits it's probably not the best reason, but he can't think of anything else. Sue sighs, saying he's hopeless, but there's a small grin on her face as she says it. Arcus laughs too, and the mood turns lighter again as they prepare to start their study session. Sue watches him quietly, thinking that his reason might be what's kept him going all this time. Still, she wonders if proving others wrong would really make him happy, or if it would just drag him down to their level. Before she can say anything, Arcus speaks up first, saying it's still a good reason. His voice is firm, and his eyes show a calm determination. He says it's better than giving up and doing nothing. Sue straightens, energy rushing back into her voice. She says it means he's moving forward and facing his problems instead of running away. Arcus looks surprised when she mentions running away, but she reminds him that he could have easily asked his uncle to hide him from everyone he dislikes. Instead, he chose to work hard and get stronger. She smiles proudly, saying that's actually really impressive. Her words hit him harder than expected. Arcus blinks, nods, and lets out a small laugh, admitting that's one way to see it. Sue taps her lip, thinking for a second, then says he should aim even higher than revenge. Arcus tilts his head, confused, and she starts bouncing with excitement. She tells him he's amazing and should dream big once he's done proving himself. Her grin widens as she leans closer, eager to hear what he'll say next. Arc rubs his chin, thinking hard. Another objective, huh? Maybe she means he needs something bigger so he doesn't lose motivation after reaching his current goal. He says maybe becoming a state magician could work, but Sue immediately shoots that down with a groan, saying it's not good enough. Arc looks shocked. There are only 11 state magicians in the whole country. How's that not enough? But Sue crosses her arms and tells him he could probably pass the exam already. He panics, saying there's no way and that his uncle's title clearly means nothing to her. Sue just laughs and tells him life's more fun when you aim for something huge. Arc can't help smiling a little, even if he's not sure where this is going. Then Sue suddenly gets another idea. Maybe he could become a general, or even a high-ranking noble. Arc gives an awkward smile, saying becoming a noble is definitely impossible. But Sue doesn't back down. She says he just needs to do something incredible that'll make everyone notice him, something that could earn him a title. She's totally fired up, already calling it the perfect plan. Arc glances at his boots, muttering that it sounds a bit much, but Sue waves him off, telling him not to worry. She throws her arms out confidently, saying she knows how amazing he is. Arc just stares, caught off guard by how much faith she has in him. Then she spins back around with a grin, saying that's exactly the kind of goal he should aim for. Arc sighs, saying a year is a long time, but Sue stretches and reminds him he's only a year older than her. He puffs up his cheeks in fake frustration, making her laugh. Arc nods with determination, saying he'll do his best. Sue cheers and says she'll be there to root for him all the way. Arc raises an eyebrow, saying she doesn't sound like an 8-year-old, and Sue proudly corrects him, saying she's 9 and older than him. She throws her hands up like a coach, shouting that if he wants to make it big, he has to grab every chance and be greedy. Arc watches her circle around the bench with quick steps, then asks what about her. Does she have plans for the future? Sue grins and says she sure does. Arc teases, asking if they're big plans. She takes a deep breath, her hair moving as she turns toward him, and says she wants to make their country strong, strong enough to overpower anyone who dares to oppose it. Arc freezes, not expecting that. She keeps talking seriously about how the Empire always looks down on them, how the tribes from the east and the southern nations threaten them, and how even the nobles inside the country could rebel at any moment. Arc leans forward, a bit worried, asking if she's okay. Sue suddenly laughs nervously and waves her hands, saying she's just kidding, that it's all from a book she read. Arc stares at her and says she must have gone through a lot if she thinks their country's that oppressed. Sue tilts her head, saying not really, clearly dodging the topic. Then she suddenly points at his pocket, asking what that thing sticking out is. Arc perks up and pulls out a small metal device, saying it's an thermometer. She picks it up, squinting at it curiously, then jokes that maybe you're supposed to pull the tube out and stick it up your butt. Arc almost chokes and tells her that's definitely not how it works. With a sigh, he says this conversation's going nowhere, and explains that it measures ether. Then he smirks, asking how she's not impressed by that. Sue's eyes go wide when Arc explains the device measures ether. She leans closer, curious where he got it, and Ark proudly says he built it himself. She's shocked, but before she can say anything, he shows how it works. The red liquid inside rises when he releases his ether, and Sue jumps in excitement, amazed by how cool it looks. She starts begging for one, repeating her request until Ark lifts the gadget out of reach. He says she can't have it yet, and she immediately pouts. Ark sighs, saying if he didn't tell her, she'd just complain later. She stamps her feet, frustrated, but he tells her to be patient. Sue grumbles, brushing back her hair, then suddenly tries to snatch it from him. Ark stiffens and tells her to stop, but she keeps pulling. He finally gives in a little, saying she can use it only when he's around. Sue lights up instantly, hugs him so tight he can barely breathe, and calls him the best. Ark sighs as she pokes his cheeks, laughing about how soft he is while he tries to pry her off. 2 years later, at grand party filled with nobles and chandeliers shining above, a young lady steps in, catching everyone's attention. People whisper about how elegant and talented she's become. They mention her name, Lisha Raytheft, daughter of one of the richest nobles in the kingdom, Lord Gaston. Her father calls out to her, and Lisha answers politely, calm and confident as she stands before the crowd. A tall noble steps forward, a wide grin on his face as he tells Lisha not to be so formal. He studies her carefully, and says she's grown into a beautiful young lady. Lisha dips her head quickly, cheeks warming, barely managing a polite thank you. Her father adds that they'd been looking forward to Lord Gaston's arrival. The noble is Count Pers Cremelia, head of a military family that controls all the eastern houses, with the Raythefts directly under him. A bright, radiant young woman glides in next. Lisha beams the moment she sees her. The men bow automatically, and Charlotte nods calmly, smiling at the compliments about how she's grown since their last meeting. She leans closer to Lisha and quietly asks where Arcus is. Lisha shakes her head firmly, saying he isn't here. Joshua steps forward, straightening his posture. He announces that he's officially ending his son's engagement. Count Cremelia narrows his eyes, suspicion flickering across his face. He asks if this is because of the son's expulsion. Joshua confirms, explaining that his son's ether isn't strong enough to live up to the Raytheft name. The Count frowns, weighing the decision, warning that the boy might still have potential. Joshua's jaw tightens as he insists that a military heir has to meet a certain standard. The Count's eyes sharpen, making Joshua freeze. Then the noble exhales, shaking his head, acknowledging Joshua's past work during the Battle of Jars, and lets the matter rest for now. The Count pauses, thinking carefully, then decides it's best to call off the engagement so Charlotte isn't put in a difficult position. Joshua bows quickly, relieved, and thanks him. He reminds the Count that the arrangement was made between them, and with Charlotte's hesitation, it seems fitting to end it. Charlotte folds her hands calmly, saying she's never even met her fiancé and that they should accept Lord Raytheft's wishes. The Count's expression cools slightly, eyes sharp. Joshua's hand tightens at his side, and he mentions that his son is now under Crucible's guidance. The Count blinks, curious, and Joshua adds that while Crucible sympathizes with his son, the boy won't actually benefit from it. The Count exhales, glancing toward the balcony as more guests arrive. A confident man strides in, boots clicking across the marble, drawing attention instantly. Lord Gaston, the Marquis, flashes a wide grin, drinking in the admiration and excitement around him. Courtiers line both sides, showering him with compliments, calling him radiant and insisting he attend their luncheons. Count Cremelia bows slightly, politely thanking him for the invitation to the event. Gaston waves him off with a booming smile, greeting the Count warmly and making it clear he enjoys keeping good relations with the eastern houses. Joshua forces a polite smile, trying to match the energy, but it's clear he's cautious. At the edge of the hall, Charlotte whispers about the many rumors surrounding the Marquis, and Lisha tilts her head thoughtfully. Joshua steps slightly forward, wary of Gaston's reputation. Lord Gaston's title and financial influence make him powerful, though his wealth is rumored to be ill-gotten and his methods callous. Joshua watches carefully, protective of his family. Gaston throws his arms wide, calling on everyone to enjoy the evening and the finest wine he's prepared. Charlotte murmurs in disbelief that it's awful, yet he still came. Lisha shrugs softly, saying that maintaining relations is part of the game. Charlotte slips out through the side door, letting the noise of the hall fade behind her. She walks along the balcony until she finds a quiet spot on the balustrade, letting out a long breath and finally feeling she can relax. From the shadows, someone watches her quietly. She lets her eyes wander over the glittering hall below, half-lidded and amused. Her parents always say these gatherings are important, but this one is ridiculously loud. Lisha frowns, thinking about the citizens footing the bill with their taxes and how long they'll put up with it. Charlotte tilts her head, guessing the Marquis's corruption has something to do with it. Lisha's gaze sharpens toward the revelers, thinking of them as nothing more than greedy, noisy cattle. Charlotte swings her legs lazily over the edge of the balcony and grins, asking about Arcus. Lisha blinks, then her expression softens. Her brother is amazing, a marvel, she thinks. Even though she's studying magic herself, she can't match his skill. He always surprises her, and his work pushes her to do better. Charlotte smiles, noticing just how hardworking he must be. Leaning closer, Charlotte asks what kind of man would interest her. Lisha blinks at first, pointing to herself, then thinks for a moment and straightens. She wants someone strong, a gentleman who can hold his own. Charlotte pictures Arcus and frowns a little, noticing how his build is actually more like Lisha's than anyone else's. Lisha exhales softly, a small smile appearing, and Charlotte relaxes with a tiny sigh of relief. She props her cheeks in her hands, looking fondly at her brother from a distance. She'd miss him if he left the estate so suddenly. Sorry, brother, she thinks, but there's a relief in knowing he's still here, still amazing. Charlotte stiffens at a rustle, eyes scanning the shadows. A nervous man in formal wear steps out, clutching a long case, bowing awkwardly and sweating. He's from the Royal Ministry of Justice. Lisha blinks, barely catching the words as the balcony torches flicker. He holds out a stout, iron-banded case, asking them to take it. Lisha and Charlotte exchange a quick look. Before they can react further, the man snaps his heels and departs down the steps, the case's latch clicking in the quiet night, the manor looming above. Lisha doesn't waste a second. She sprints through the halls, clutching the case tight, breath quick, heels clacking against the marble. She bursts past Noah, calling for her brother. The butler adjusts his glasses, starting to explain where Arcus is, but Lisha blasts past before he can finish, slamming open the door. Arcus lounges in his study, surrounded by beakers, notes, and jars. He perks up instantly at the interruption, brightening when he sees Lisha. She holds the case out, excitement and urgency in her eyes. Meanwhile, Lord Gaston is exploding down the corridor, furious. He's missing papers, financial records and documents hinting at corruption, and the hooded aide bows low, trembling. Gaston's jaw grinds as he demands which ones, forcing himself to stay composed. Then comes worse news, a secret ledger has vanished. Gaston sinks into a chair, leather creaking, eyes twitching with irritation. The aide confirms they have a suspect, but the documents are gone. Gaston narrows his gaze, realizing the Wraithef's daughter was seen leaving with a black case that didn't match her dress. His mind races. The Eastern military houses are too rigid, and now Wraithef could report anything to Cremelia. Gaston drums his fingers, thinking it over, then decides the girl should be sent to him in secret. They'll convince her to return the case. The aide swallows nervously at the word persuade, but Gaston's eyes harden. He flashes a thin, calm smile, saying it'll be gentle, of course. Back at the manor, Arcus flips through the case and freezes. A secret ledger. He stares at the papers, astonished, wondering why anyone would trust something so serious to a kid. Lisha fidgets beside him, unsure if it's really that important. Arcus's eyes sharpen. It's serious evidence, far beyond a child's responsibility. He asks if the courier said anything. Lisha nods, repeating softly that he warned her not to tell father. Arcus folds his arms, thinking, then asks what she wants to do. Lisha pauses, then squares her shoulders. She's been taught that nobles carry pride and responsibility, and they must act in a way that protects the people beneath them. They must follow the law and set an example. Arcus studies her for a moment, impressed. She's willing to put herself in danger for justice, and she doesn't hesitate. Arcus grins, setting the plan. The next day, Lisha walks through town with Charlotte, keeping the case secure. Charlotte raises an eyebrow, teasing, noticing how much Lisha trusts Arcus. Lisha just glances away, noting how no one dares enter his room, and smiles faintly. Charlotte chuckles, picturing Arcus, cute, a little girly, and impossibly smart. She's about to tease more when a hand lunges from a shadowy alley. Charlotte yells for Lisha to run, and Lisha spins, startled. Boots slam against the cobblestones as the figure closes in, fast and threatening. Charlotte yanks Lisha into a sprint, shouting as they race down the alley. Lisha stumbles to keep up, wide-eyed and panicked. Around the corner, a pack of thugs appears, cutting off their escape. More men close in from all sides, boots pounding the stone. Leisha grabs Charlotte's sleeve, heart racing as the last gap disappears. Charlotte squares her shoulders, scanning every shadow. The thugs grin and fan out, one lunging to grab Leisha's wrist. Leisha shrieks, yanked toward him, but Charlotte reacts instantly. Her blade flashes past Leisha's cheek and smashes the thug's fingers off, steel biting the cobbles. He howls in pain, clutching his hand. Another brute charges, weapon raised, and Charlotte pivots, eyes sharp, ready for the next swing. A boot slams into his ribs, sending him sliding back. Her blade slices the air, voice fierce, letting them know attacking children of noblemen comes with consequences. The thugs snicker nervously, sweat beading as the alley tightens around them. Charlotte's mind races. Did someone send them? They know who we are. She exhales, shaking off the fear. No matter. A cloaked swordsman roars and lunges at her. Charlotte meets him head-on, blade singing through the alley, cutting with precision and calm fury. Her eyes harden as she grips the hilt tighter. She isn't just swinging a blade, she's reading their moves, predicting every strike. This is her gift, foresight. She lowers into stance, ready? She can lose, maybe. Every step, every swing, she's in control. A bald giant steps forward with his sword resting on his shoulder, and Charlotte knows immediately he's the leader. She narrows her eyes and dares him, thinking if she beats him maybe they'll figure out who sent the thugs. He sneers, calling her fierce and asking her to put the sword away, but Charlotte doesn't flinch. She might have a plan. She darts in, fast as a blur. She slips past in a gust of motion, hair whipping. He lunges with a shove, shouting that he has her, but she twists away just in time. Her thrust stops short as a hidden short blade flashes from his waist. A trap. Her eyes widen as slashes whistle past her hair. She freezes for a heartbeat, breath ragged, realizing foresight told her she wouldn't miss, but she can't win against his raw strength. Her mind races and she knows there's only one reason to keep fighting. She tightens her grip, gritting her teeth, and the giant watches her lower the blade, impressed, calling her smart. Charlotte whispers to Leisha that they need to find a chance to flee, and if not, she must do what a noble child has to do. Leisha nods, lips trembling, fear rising but determination strong in her chest. She silently calls for her brother and hopes he will be there. Arcus blinks at the envelope, confused about who could have sent it. The maid says someone just told her to hand it over and make sure it reached him. It wasn't Noah who delivered it, which already feels odd. Arcus opens the letter, and his eyes widen as he reads. He bursts out of his room, demanding to know where Leisha is. The maid says she's out for the afternoon. Arcus clenches the letter in his fist, furious, then storms off shouting that Leisha's been kidnapped. The note is clear: bring the ledger to the plaza near the slums or they'll both die. Noah adjusts his eye patch and asks what this ledger is. Arcus pulls out the hidden case from under his bed and explains that a servant gave it to Leisha at the party. He says the letter mentions both, so someone else must be caught up in this too. He opens the case and says it's evidence of Gaston's corruption. Noah studies him, silent for a moment, then lets out a quiet sigh. He asks why Arcus hid something this serious. Arcus apologizes, saying he never thought the Marquis would find out. Noah tells him to hold off on excuses for now and starts piecing things together. If they went after Leisha, it probably means the servant who passed the case on didn't make it out safely. Arcus slams his fist on the desk, angry that Leisha got dragged into this. Noah stays calm and says they should report it before making any moves. Arcus nods and tells Noah not to tell his parents, to go to his uncle instead since he has more pull and a fuss here would only make things worse. He says nobody in their right mind would kill a viscount's daughter, then straightens and says the important part out loud: he's going to the plaza himself. Noah frowns, warning the letter probably lies, and Arcus just grins because he already knows that. He tightens his sleeves and lays out the plan. He will let them think they caught him, then use that moment to get Leisha and the other victim away. They need to act quick and quiet, and they need Noah's help because nobody expects Arcus to be a magician. Noah asks what happens if the rescue fails, and Arcus answers with a grin that there is a plan B. While Noah buys time in the manor, Arcus wants him to find Leisha's exact location inside Gaston's estate. Noah sighs and agrees, already guessing Arcus will make him do it whether he likes it or not. Arcus points and confirms, and Noah mutters about a headache while hiding a faint smile. Arcus thinks out loud about the messenger, wondering if the servant belonged to the surveillance office and why he handed the ledger to Leisha. Was the other evidence strong enough to topple Gaston, or did the servant just throw it away by trusting a child? The doubt feels sharp, but Arcus pushes it down and asks Noah one last thing to investigate. Noah accepts the task, steady and ready, because that is what servants do. Arcus steps into the slum-side plaza, the case firm in his grip, eyes sweeping the quiet square. Not a soul in sight. The stillness feels heavy until footsteps echo from behind, slow and deliberate. A voice calls out, low and taunting, saying he really showed up. Arcus stiffens, ready to act the part. A small squad emerges from an alley, led by a bald man in dented armor. Their gear looks mismatched, but their stance and discipline give away experience. Arcus notes it instantly. Mercenaries. The leader stops a few steps away and asks if he's Arcus Wraitheft. Arcus nods and confirms. The bald man gestures for him to follow. Arcus refuses, voice loud and steady. The mercenaries laugh, their mockery echoing through the empty plaza. Arcus grips his chest, then in one motion draws a short blade from his sleeve, shouting Leisha's name and demanding they release her. He charges, swinging from above. The leader moves with practiced ease, knocking Arcus's wrist with the steel-plated gauntlet. Pain shoots up his arm as the blade flies from his grip. He stumbles back while the men close in, grinning. Arcus dives for the knife, fumbles, then catches it again with trembling fingers. The men sneer and tell him to give up. He drops to a knee, clutching his injured wrist, muttering that he could fight if he only had magic. Their laughter grows louder. One mocks that the Wraitheft heir is as useless as people say. The others pile on, joking about how he can't use magic, can't study, can't even run right, and to top it off, looks like a girl. Arcus freezes mid-breath, anger flashing in his eyes. He forces himself back into the act, remembering his role. With sudden energy, he throws out his hands and shouts for them to give Leisha back. He tries to cast a spell, words tripping over themselves, calling for fire to come forth. But all that bursts out is a weak puff of air that fades instantly. He stares at his empty hands, caught between frustration and disbelief as the mercenaries roar with laughter. Arcus forces a shaky grin, pretending to be helpless while the bald merc grabs him by the collar and lifts him like a toy. The man laughs, saying the rumors were true, and tosses him toward a wagon waiting nearby. Arcus stumbles inside as another merc spots the suitcase, snatching it up before shoving him in. The door slams, and the wagon jolts forward. Inside, Arcus watches the mercs flip through the papers, heart pounding but face calm. They can't read half of it anyway, and the real documents are long gone. He replaced them with random letters. One merc squints, mutters something about love notes, and tosses the file aside. Arcus quietly exhales. Step 1 complete. The wagon rattles through dark streets until it rolls into a massive estate. Iron gates swing open, and Arcus braces himself. This has to be Gaston's mansion. He thinks of Leisha, just hanging there a bit longer. They drag him through shiny marble halls filled with gold trim and gaudy statues. Arcus can't help but roll his eyes at how flashy everything looks. Somewhere ahead, a man's bored voice calls out, asking if they got the kid. The mercs shove Arcus forward, saying the job's done. Inside the study, a man sits behind a tall chair, looking sharp and smug. Arcus recognizes him instantly, Lord Gaston. Gaston greets him, eyes cold, asking if he's really Arcus Wraitheft. Arcus nods and slams his hands on the desk, demanding to know where Leisha is. Gaston raises a hand, calm as ever, saying they'll talk once he gets the ledger. A servant opens the case and shows the papers. Gaston flips through, and his expression shifts from confident to annoyed. He says this isn't the real thing, that these aren't the documents Leisha had. Arcus tries to bluff, saying an official took it back. Gaston smirks, leaning forward, voice dripping with sarcasm. If that were true, Arcus wouldn't have walked right into his hands. Arcus grits his teeth and tells Gaston that the real evidence is back at his house. Gaston narrows his eyes and asks if anyone else knows. Arcus denies it twice and demands that Leisha be released, promising to bring the ledger himself. Gaston leans back with a calm smirk, saying he needs proof and accusing Arcus of trying to fool him. He warns there won't be a second chance, and orders the guards to take Arcus away since he's no longer useful. When a guard asks where to put him, Arcus shakes his head but suddenly perks up after hearing a suggestion to lock him with the girls. The idea sounds perfect. If that happens, he can reach Leisha, protect her, and find a way to escape. But just as the guard is about to follow through, Gaston hesitates mid-sentence. The room grows tense. For a moment, Arcus imagines how close he was to reuniting with his sister. Then Gaston changes his mind and orders them to take Arcus to the Holy Tower instead. Arcus stiffens in shock. The guard hesitates, reminding Gaston that Arcus is known for his lack of talent. Gaston taps the chair arm and says that even so, he's still from a martial family, so it's safer this way. Arcus feels his plan crumble completely. Gaston then leans forward with a sharp grin, suggesting that Arcus's weak act could be a trick. The guards grab Arcus by the collar, dragging him out of the room while Gaston calmly repeats his order. Outside the Wraitheft estate, Gaston lays out new instructions. The evidence must be inside the house, so they'll wait and send someone in later when things settle down. When a guard asks what to do with the girls, Gaston smirks and tells them to proceed as planned. Arcus, still within earshot, goes pale as the words hit him. The guard yanks his collar, telling him to move, while Arcus yells that Gaston has lost his mind for targeting a viscount's daughter. But Gaston stays composed, saying that noble children go missing all the time and that it's easy to cover the traces. Arcus struggles as he's dragged away, realizing Gaston has no hesitation about erasing anyone who gets in his way. Gaston spreads his arms and starts lecturing that the world runs on money, and money is power that can bury any crime. He calls it the lubricant of society, claiming it bends even the most sincere feelings to his will, just like magic. Arcus glares at him and asks if he really believes money can solve everything. Gaston smiles and says he knows it can. Arcus snaps, furious, but a guard yanks his collar tight, cutting his words short as he chokes out a strange sound. The guard squeezes harder, warning him not to move. Arcus's vision fades until he blacks out and drops to the floor. The guard mocks that the kid really is useless after all. Gaston looks down without emotion, then asks if the man has ever met a terrifying child. The guard frowns and says no. Gaston turns slightly, eyes narrowing, and says he has. He talks about the Prince of Laner, a cloaked and masked prodigy known as the kingdom's most powerful magician. The guard mutters that he's heard of the prince's abilities, but Gaston warns him not to speak so casually about royalty. They are not ordinary people. Royalty, he says, are something else entirely, creatures almost inhuman. As he speaks, an image of the masked prince flashes in his mind, surrounded by raw power. When the guard asks why he's bringing this up, Gaston looks back at Arcus and says it's because of his eyes. The boy had acted weak, but he never looked afraid. That calm defiance reminded him of the prince. Even now, Gaston wipes a bead of sweat and admits that talking to Arcus didn't feel like dealing with a child at all. Meanwhile, Arcus is being dragged down a cold corridor by two guards. His head spins as he slowly regains consciousness. One of the guards tells him to wake up. They've arrived. Arcus opens his eyes and sees it looming above him, the holy tower, smooth, tall, and silent. He swallows hard, remembering the stories that escape from this place is impossible. Inside, the curved corridor gleams under pale light, while the guard's boots echo with every step. Deep within the cell block, another guard chats with a scruffy prisoner lounging on a bunk. He asks why the man is still here when his sentence ended ages ago. The prisoner just grins, saying he's got nowhere else to go, and that the place isn't bad anyway, clean beds, regular meals, everything a man could want. The guard sighs, shaking his head at the same old attitude. He calls him by name, Kaziguari, and the man tilts his head with a lazy smirk. Moments later, the door clangs open, and Arcus storms in, pointing straight at him. He yells that this is the guy who kidnapped him, demanding they can't be put in the same cell. His outburst echoes down the corridor, as Kazi calmly plugs his ears, pretending not to hear a word. The guard glances between them, unimpressed, and says they'll have to share the room until Kazi decides to leave. Kazi stretches out on the bunk again, acting like he owns the place, while the guard reminds him his sentence ended long ago. Kazi waves it off with a casual laugh and tells Arcus to relax. The guard walks off down the hall, telling him to get out soon. Arcus grabs the bars, shouting for him to wait, but the footsteps fade, leaving him stuck in the cell with the same man who helped ruin everything. Kazi leans in with a grin and says Arcus is the reason he's locked up. He steps closer, shoes sliding across the floor, and asks what Arcus is so scared of. Then he flops back onto the bunk and says he's not after revenge. Arcus blinks, confused, as Kazi admits he crossed a line and messed up. He stares at the ceiling and says he's sorry. Arcus falls silent, processing it. Arcus asks why Kazi hasn't left yet, pointing out that someone with magic like him could work anywhere. Kazi swings his legs off the bed, eyes dark, and says it's about money. He taps the floor, gestures like weighing coins, and explains that everything is decided by how much you have, from living to dying. Arcus listens, uneasy, remembering a shabby house and a hand reaching for coins. Kazi lounges again and tells Arcus to get used to him because the food here is free. Arcus explodes and demands why everyone treats him like a girl. Kazi snickers, clearly enjoying it. Arcus points at the door and says he won't get used to anything, he's getting out. Kazi smirks and says not to bother. Arcus examines the cell and marvels at the ceiling magic, noticing the walls and bars would take more than a few spells to break. Kazi asks if he's listening, explaining that even if someone slips out, guards will swarm and restrain them. Arcus narrows his eyes, magic coiling around his fingers, then focuses. He snaps his fingers and casts Razor Aquarius. Thin blades of water slice cleanly through the iron bars, which fall with a clatter. Kazi stares wide-eyed as Arcus shrugs, saying he's a magician and it's just a spell. Arcus grips the remaining bars, ready to move, while Kazi warns they'll grab him the moment he steps out. Arcus doesn't hesitate, thinking only of his sister, and that waiting is not an option. Arcus explains that his sister found proof of a noble's corruption and that noble is holding her at his estate. He clenches the bars, knowing he has to rescue her and not sure what will happen if he stays. Kazi mutters about a noble, saying it's always about money and they never change. He clenches a fist, warning that if that's the kind of noble Arcus is up against, he won't play fair. Arcus snaps back that he's saving her no matter what. Kazi falls silent, watching as footsteps pass outside. Arcus whispers that the coast is clear and slips through the open bars. Kazi strides out and says he'll help. Arcus startles, asking why. Kazi shrugs and says he'll want a reward, a quick buck, then leans down with a half smile and asks for payment. Arcus stammers but nods. They seal the deal. Kazi says he never forgets who owes him, and will help as best he can. He introduces himself properly as Kazi Gwari. Arcus smiles, offers a handshake, and introduces himself as Arcus Raytheft. Kazi stops by another cell and yanks a cloth from a slot, explaining he needs to grab something. Arcus pinches his nose at the smell as Kazi drapes it over his shoulders and keeps walking while inmates shout to be let out. Arcus asks what the cloth is for. Kazi says, "Stuff," then quizzes Arcus on the tower's layout while telling the other prisoners to pipe down. Arcus admits he doesn't know much about the tower. Kazi fills in the gaps. Guard rooms every third floor with 5 to 7 men each, all magicians, armed with sealing gear. If they charge straight, at least 50 will swarm them. Arcus twitches, there isn't enough ether to handle that many spells. Kazi asks how many he can cast, and Arcus gloomily admits it's not enough. Arcus estimates he can fire about 10 mid-range spells, saving most of his ether for the noble's mansion. He fumes, annoyed at how little he has. That's why his house cut him loose. But he's determined to crush that fop and his whole scheme. Kazi whistles, teasing him about a weakness, and Arcus snaps back that Kazi's face screams villain as they stride down the hall. Kazi grins and readies the capable cloth of Algol just as a guard rounds the corner, the first customer of many. He sweeps his hand and murmurs a binding spell, envelop the rabbits, bundle them, tie them, and silence them at once. The guard steps forward, unaware of the trap. Kazi snaps the spell and the enchanted towel whips out, wrapping the guard head to toe, muffling his voice and pinning his arms. With a swish and a thump, the man wobbles, gagged and bound, making faint sounds while Arcus watches stunned. Arcus calls it a strange spell, and Kazi laughs that the kid who fights with trash shouldn't talk. Arcus guesses the source, a handbook from the spiritual age, Algol's week of farming, Tuesday's harvest. Kazi flinches, asking how he knew. Arcus smiles, saying he has a good memory and can recite every word from when they first met. Kazi shudders and admits he's creeping him out. A patrolling guard hears voices and calls out. Arcus fakes a panic, yelling that one of the guards collapsed. The man rushes over and finds a body on the floor with Arcus kneeling beside it. Confused by the kid, the guard hesitates. From the side, Kazi steps in with a sly smirk, ready to strike. Kazi claps, the bound guard slumps into a neat bundle. Another guard rushes in yelling, "What are you doing?" Kazi snaps the cloth again. Arcus steps forward shouting, "Leave it to me." He casts Black Bullet, the dark round slams the guard's visor and cracks it. Blood drips, the man drops. Arcus kneels, ties the arm, says a healing spell will fix him. Kazi stares, impressed and rattled. Arcus explains he invented the spell, admits the chant needs work. Kazi watches him crouch, realizes this kid is something else. They climb 10 floors, every guard down the hall. Arcus pants, says he has half ether left. Kazi scoffs, one spell is basically everything. He says no more wasting ether, they'll change tactics. The hall is quiet, no prisoners shouting. Arcus tells Kazi to move quietly, they'll hear guards from far away. A soft voice calls out, "Oh hello, what are you two doing?" A restrained woman in a wheelchair rolls out from the shadows. She tells Arcus not to be scared, smiles, calls him a cute little bunny rabbit. Arcus yelps, panic sets in. Kazi tightens the cloth and steps forward asking who she is. She smiles brightly and says she's a prisoner. Kazi calls her a sneaky fox and eyes her suspiciously. Arcus repeats, a prisoner. She nods and adds her security is tighter than the others. She giggles and assures him she won't hurt him while still bound to the chair. She tilts her head and asks what they're doing. Arcus blurts out, escaping. She rolls closer, studies his outfit, whispers he isn't a prisoner, is he? The wheel clatters as she leans in, faces inches apart. Arcus stammers, "I'm," before he can finish. He growls and tries to speak. She chides him gently, dropping the voice like that doesn't suit that face. She giggles, didn't mean to offend. His clothes fooled her. The cravat and polished jacket scream nobility. If he waits, someone will come fetch him. Arcus says waiting won't work, he has to get out now. Kazi adds he's lending a hand. She blinks, reminds them Arcus isn't a prisoner. Kazi says he's done his time. She taps Kazi's head with the wheel rim. "Hey, you're famous, must be the freeloader." Kazi trembles with rage, yells to cram it. Arcus tries to calm him. Boots thunder, another guard charges up the hall shouting what's going on here. Arcus tells Kazi to stick to the plan. Kazi grimaces, readies the cloth. The wheelchair girl rolls forward cloaked in dense black aura. The guard freezes mid-speech, panicked, pointing, "No, why are you here?" Arcus and Kazi stare, confused. The girl rolls forward, straps rattling, musing aloud, duty, whim, boredom, punishment, I wonder. She asks what she thinks it is. The man panics, shouting Rotterbell, orders her to stop, stay back, but keeps retreating as she closes in. She smiles cold and calls the guard foolish, then raises her voice low and steady while heat shimmers around them. Her chant paints a mirage that presses close like an oasis, and the guard reels back as water erupts between her hands. The fountain bursts straight into his face, the pressure cracking the air with a sharp crack, and the man staggers as if squeezed dry. Arcus and Kazi rush in. The guard lies crumpled, skin tight and mouth dry. Arcus checks him, tense, and says the spell wrung him out like a sponge. It does not look fatal, but the effect is brutal. The woman watches coolly, saying humans collapse when you take away what they need. She admits she never heard the word dehydration, then sneers that putting the wretch out of his misery would be entertaining. Arcus gives the guard water, and keeps him breathing while Kazi mutters that she is creepy. When the guard steadies, the woman glides forward and murmurs, "Little bunny." Arcus flinches as pale hands reach from the dark and cup his face. She praises him, calls him smart, then asks if he can quench her thirst. Her voice is soft and close, and Arcus feels her reflection in his pupils. He jerks back and demands who she is. She feigns hurt and laughs that he could dislike her, then says she likes him and will help. She admits she is tied up more securely than most prisoners but still free enough. Arcus worries aloud about trouble. She waves him off and points down the hall, saying they should visit the guards and cause a stir. She wheels down the hall, announcing she answers to no one but His Majesty. With a casual wave, she bids Arcus goodbye, "Little bunny," and asks him to tell her later how he escaped. Arcus shivers, and Kazi mutters what a weirdo as the chair rattles away. Arcus can't help but wonder who she really is. Kazi tugs him along with the cloth. There's no way he's chasing after her. Arcus protests, but curiosity gnaws at him. A poised figure steps from the corridor, calm and steady. It's Noah. Arcus brightens, relief washing over him. Noah greets him warmly, glad to see him intact. He had tailed the guards after Arcus was taken, but something in the security broke down suddenly. Kazi frowns. Guards don't just abandon posts here. Noah tilts his head at Kazi, noting he appears to be a prisoner. Arcus blurts that Kazi is helping him escape. Kazi grumbles that he served his time 2 years ago. Noah raises an eyebrow, asking if it's wise to trust him. Arcus whispers they'll sort that later. Help is better than none. Introductions are quick. Noah, servant of Master Arcus, and Kazi. Kazi grunts, claiming he has enough to handle already. Noah sighs, saying that if worry remains, just keep an eye on him. Screams echo from down the hall. The wheelchair woman is really making a stir. Arcus explains she offered to help them escape, not caged but likely a prisoner. His words make Noah's monocle lift, and Arcus recalls the guard's name, Rotterbell. Noah nods at the name, Alicia, dry spell, Rotterbell. She became a state magician last year and somehow claimed a post on the tower's highest floor. He doesn't say more. Arcus points out she was roaming freely. Does that sound like confinement? Cassie shrugs, glad she's on their side but warns not to linger. Guards thunder past their hiding spot, drawn by the chaos she caused. Arcus spies a window and grins. He's got an idea. Cassie freezes, then grips his sleeve, asking what he's thinking. Arcus says no way, he's climbing down. He doesn't want to die. Cassie erupts, what then? Arcus points up, time to fly. Cassie sputters, fly? You've lost it. Noah adds that etheric flight is considered impossible. Arcus waves it off, come on, don't be like that. He mutters that maybe the right incantation could make it work. Cassie groans, incantation my bud, even the chronicles can't hack flight. Noah stays calm, saying all practical attempts have failed. Divine spirits won't let humans soar. Arcus points at the ground, asking what makes things fall. Noah says it's the spirits, citing the old rule of ascent and descent. Everything longs for its source, stones for earth, fire for sky, attraction explains up and down. Arcus frowns. That's basically Aristotle. He shakes his head and corrects them. It's not a desire to return home. Objects are pulled to the earth by a force called Gaia. Gravity isn't common knowledge here. Arcus plants a hand and begins the chant. Ether wraps around him as he floats midair. He can't move much, but he isn't falling. Cassie's eyes widen and he steps back. Noah watches quietly, impressed as always. Arcus gives a thumbs up and signals the others to follow, reminding them to respect the pull of the earth. Arcus and Noah vault through the window. Cassie follows reluctantly, stepping onto the ledge as wind roars past him, forcing himself to hold steady. They land outside the gate. Up in a tree, a girl cheers while a stoic officer stands nearby. Lisa Lauze, chief officer of the surveillance office, notes she never expected to loosen tower security. The girl checks down from the branch, muttering in disbelief at Arcus being sent, while Lisa hesitates. The girl turns cold, warning Officer Lisa Lauze that this is her final chance. Lisa shudders and insists she isn't lying. The girl presses, saying silence counts as lying. She already knows Lisa's organization expected this. Lisa stammers, claiming no evidence. The girl grips her baton, and a thin dart whistles past Lisa's face. She draws a blade and commands Lisa to investigate the matter, warning that failure will cost her head. Lisa snaps to attention. The girl smiles, eager to see what happens. Lisa reports that Arcus's servant entered recently. They were too fast to have climbed down. The girl watches the tower, curious how Arcus managed to escape, and then skips off, promising to ask him later. Arcus reaches a high wall and stares at the looming mansion beyond. He notes this is it, hoping Gaston is ready. Noah explains the estate belongs to the Marquis, Gaston, and that Arcus's sister is inside. Cassie twitches at the name, repeating it with a dark look. Arcus thanks Cassie for the help and promises to send the money later. Cassie decides to join. Arcus hesitates. Gaston's a big deal, but Cassie shrugs. Arcus is a noble too. Arcus mutters he's low-ranking and disinherited. Cassie ignores them, finds a tree over the wall, and climbs up effortlessly. Arcus groans. He was still talking. They slip into the garden while guards patrol. Security is tight, the place crawling with mercs. Arcus clenches his fist and charges for a head-on approach. Cassie groans at the recklessness, but Arcus counts roughly 20 enemies and calculates they can handle it. He dashes out to bait them while Noah and Cassie flank from the sides. Guards shout as Arcus sprints past. Cassie whistles at Arcus's guts. Noah asks if they can rely on him. Cassie shrugs. He's paid, he works. Noah nods, ready? Cassie calls out, teasing, while Arcus leaps onto a statue base and mocks the mercs, grabbing their attention. Noah begins chanting an ice-binding spell, summoning shards of frost under a chilling wind. Freezing gale spreads through the courtyard, locking mercs in place as they skid helplessly. Arcus flips one soldier and moves on a third, while the chant continues, weaving icy precision into their assault. Noah completes the conjuration, the frozen sword of Jacqueline. A merc swings, snarling, but Noah parries, ice cracking along the blade. He sweeps past and shatters the thug's weapon with a slash, an ice spike blooming along the shoulder. The man twitches, frozen, as other mercs hesitate, eyes flickering at the cold light from Noah's glasses. Noah drives another ice spike clean through the thug, shards spraying behind him. The remaining mercs clink blades and brace, gusts of freezing magic whipping the courtyard. Noah steps forward, precise and lethal, ready to block any attack on Arcus. The mercs panic, attempting fire spells, but Arcus grins, dodging effortlessly. Kazi strolls across the frozen courtyard, unimpressed, brushing off the chaos. A noblewoman's heels click sharply, signaling her presence, so they're both insane. The merc captain commands the attack. Hooded mages chant a fire collection curse, aiming to burn everything down. Kazi counters immediately, sweeping his hand with a grin. Flames smother, curling into nothing as he shields them both. The courtyard freezes in tension, the air thick with ice and magic, but the three keep moving, unstoppable. Arcus gasps as Kazi counters the fire. The mages panic, scrambling, but Kazi smirks, enjoying their predictable patterns. He casts, chains erupting from the ground, ghostly and unyielding. Cerberus' curse wraps around the mercs' arms and legs, yanking them off balance. They stumble, flailing, trapped by spectral shackles. Kazi clenches a fist and the chains snap taut, wrenching one merc violently, tearing a scream from him. Armor rattles as the curse lifts them into the air, slamming them against one another and suspending them across the courtyard. Chains crisscross overhead, ice shards litter the ground, and a final hand claws futilely toward Kazi. He stands calm, surveying the chaos. Noah dips his head, impressed, while Arcus stares wide-eyed, amazed. Kazi shrugs. To him, it's only a 10-year-old's wonder. Arcus straightens, ready to act. Chains rattle behind them, but there's no time to waste. Arcus steps forward, power gathering in his hands. Kazi glances at the glow, questioning the ether. Arcus doesn't hesitate. The spell hums, shimmering, light crackling around his fingers. It barely touches his ether reserves, but the effect promises devastation. The three move forward, unstoppable, magic and strategy in perfect sync. Archers line the courtyard, bows raised, arrows ready. Arcus plants his feet, hands glowing, and whispers the incantation. Metal clips fly, snapping sparks through the thick cloud of flower-like dust he conjures. Exposure dust billows outward, blinding, choking, filling the air with blinding white. Archers cough, flail, shield their faces. Kazi and Noah tense, ready to intervene, but Arcus grins. The dust isn't lethal by itself, just chaos. He snaps his fingers, and the clips ignite, flames roar across the courtyard. The blast erupts, bodies scattered, scorched, the courtyard engulfed in heat and smoke. Noah staggers, eyes wide. Kazi freezes, staring. Arcus steps forward calmly, hands glowing, dust still swirling, the destruction he's doing. The brilliance of the explosion hides every movement. Archers topple, shields smoldering, mages stagger backward, magic disrupted by the sudden firestorm. Arcus used a natural phenomenon, a simple trick with Miller's dust, turning it into a weapon that saves ether while devastating the enemy. Kazi swallows hard. Arcus keeps moving, eyes sharp, calculating, already planning the next strike. Arcus hears whispers brushing past, nearby, but he doesn't wait. He darts forward, leaving Kazi muttering about how the kid creeps him out and Noah noting the concern Arcus invites. Arcus bolts, promising to catch up later, while Noah and Kazi brace for the incoming wave. Noah signals him to go ahead. Kazi cracks his neck, muttering he might as well earn his pay. Noah levels his sword, ready for extra work, scanning the courtyard where more mercenaries gather. Inside the manor, servants and guards tense at the blast outside. The tied-up girls press closer to one another, worry sharp in their eyes. A robed boss strides in, commanding the situation. Reports come fast. Intruders wandered in, flushed out quickly, but the kid from the tower has returned. The girl's eyes widen, hope sparking. The boss frowns, assessing the problem. 2 men with the boy, not a full army. The situation tightens. Guards confirm the count. The bald lieutenant stresses it's only 3, any more, and Lord Wraitheft would be aware. The boss smirks, calculating, understanding the boy's urgency for his sister leaves him without reinforcements. A butler bursts in, alarmed, announcing a child has broken in. The boss snaps orders, dismissing concern over the boy's age, demanding capture. The lieutenant checks on the other 2 men, but the manor freezes, the tension sharp, every servant and guard poised, waiting for the first clash. Outside, the courtyard smolders, blackened and charred. Every guard lies incapacitated, scattered in ruin. The girls gasp, faces pale. The bald lieutenant grabs the butler by the collar, furious, eyes wide at the devastation. The butler stammers, insisting he saw it himself through the window, every last one of them down. The boss slams a fist into the table, disbelief carved deep across his face. The bald lieutenant reminds him there were only 3 attackers, a boy and 2 others barely grown. The boss mutters, the Wraithefs should be past their prime, maybe aided by a mage or 2, but this boy. The lieutenant shrugs, the kid is alone now, and they can handle him. The boss snaps, warning again, he is no ordinary opponent, a wolf in sheep's clothing. A sudden boom shatters the tension as a door flies off its hinges down the hall. Footsteps echo through the smoke. Arcus bursts in, eyes scanning for Leisha, rushing to her side. He cuts her bonds with swift hands, relief flooding through him as the girls brighten. The bald lieutenant hefts his blade, grinning, sizing up the boy. Arcus narrows his eyes, readying himself. It's time to hunt. Arcus exhales, heart pounding, she's okay. Leisha beams through tears, the moment of reunion sharp and warm. The robed lord storms in, enraged and surprised, but Arcus stands firm, sword at his side. He moves for his sister, declaring she's leaving. The lord snarls, outrage boiling over, while the bald lieutenant cracks his neck, realizing the adults that once controlled the boy are gone. Arcus steps forward, gaze unflinching, ready to prove he can handle this alone. The brute lunges, roaring, and the chase ignites. The brute's blade slams down, sparks flying as Arcus blocks and skids backward, teeth gritted, the sword grinding inches from his face. He twists, slides low, carving a sweeping arc along the floor. The thug smirks, catching the motion, eyes sharp. Arcus sets his stance, admitting his training, a trick learned under his uncle's watchful eye. Blades clash in a storm of metal. The brute drives forward with heavy swings, each impact pushing Arcus back, shards flying from smashed shelves. A low kick slices past, and Arcus slips, landing on the rail below, arms wide, ready to strike. The brute swings overhead, brutal and precise, but Arcus ducks, the attack jamming against his defenses. He springs up, exploiting the opening, momentum coiling in his legs and arms. Across the lounge he sprints, the polished floor reflecting the flashes of steel. The brute curses, charging with a whistling blade, overcommitting to his swing. Arcus pivots onto a sofa back, launching high, flipping over the brute as the sword bites into the couch. Midair, his hand extends, eyes locked on the next move. The girls cling together, tense and wide-eyed. Both the robed lord and the thug register the shift. The kid now has the advantage. Arcus lands in a low slide, sword humming with kinetic force. The girls murmur, awestruck. The brute gulps, mutters a curse under his breath, and raises his blade again, nerves barely masked, as Arcus rises, ready to continue the assault. Arcus blocks a crushing strike, but the brute drives a knee into his gut and boots him across the floor. He coughs, gasping, fists trembling. The thug sneers, but the confidence falters. Arcus forces himself up, chest heaving, fists tight. The brute hammers him relentlessly, shoving Arcus down, shouting that he's just a kid, useless at fighting, talentless. Arcus crashes under the weight of the blows, wheezing, but he forces himself upright, resets his stance, eyes blazing. Leisha watches, confused and worried, memories of helplessness flashing through her mind. Arcus strides past the brute toward the girls, voice cutting through the chaos, demanding the fight stop. The brute roars, charging again, sword raised, sneer fixed, planting his foot, leveling the blade. Arcus braces, heart pounding, and laughs defiantly, refusing to give up. The fight continues, every strike, every block, every movement sharp, fast, and relentless, Arcus pushing through exhaustion, pain, and insult, refusing to let his sister or himself be defeated. Arcus narrows his eyes, focusing, realizing a head-on fight won't work. He knew that all along. A grin spreads across his face as he gestures across the room, taking advantage of being knocked over. The brute charges, taunting his small ether pool. Arcus mutters a chant under his breath. A glowing ring forms on his finger. He aims and fires. The shot hits the brute square in the forehead. The girls flinch. The giant sways, then collapses, face first, twitching. Arcus blows smoke from his finger, noting the spell's usefulness. He'll have to thank Sue later. Leisha, still trying to process what just happened, stares wide-eyed. Arcus strides forward, unbothered, telling the Lord it's over. The Lord's sweat beads on his brow as he smirks, acknowledging the boy's power. Arcus blinks briefly, momentarily puzzled at the man's reaction, then steels himself for what comes next. Noah and Kazi burst in, arriving just after Arcus handled the brute. The Lord suddenly drops to his knees, hands raised. A sly grin spreads across his face as he proposes a deal. He'll overlook the raid and release the hostages if Arcus hands over the evidence. He even offers aid, assuming the disinherited boy needs funds. Arcus clenches his fist, exhaling to steady himself. He refuses flat, making it clear money won't solve this. The Lord snaps back, insisting nobility isn't about being squeaky clean. Money counts no matter how it's earned. Arcus counters, dismissing the offer entirely. He wants nothing to do with tainted wealth. Noah watches tensely, calling out to him.